Now this, President Trump considering a strategy shift, perhaps sending as many as 3,000 troops to Afghanistan to combat the resurgent Taliban. Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, he joins us. He's in studio. Of course, also former Republican congressman from Florida. It's always great seeing you.
Good to be with you, Charles.
This is sort of alarming. This is for many reasons. First of all, that the Taliban is still around. Secondly, that we may put more boots on the ground, which is something a lot of people don't want to see happen.
Well, this kind of reminds me, I was born and raised in Atlanta, of how the Falcons played the game against the Patriots. They started to play not to lose, and they took their foot off the pedal. And that's exactly what happened. When President Obama made the unilateral declaration that combat operations are over in Afghanistan, the only way, two ways you end the combat operations. You win or you lose. You just can't walk away. So what we have seen since 2001, the Taliban now controls more territory than they have since that point. So we need to go in and have the right type of troops to task to go in to deny the Taliban, as well as ISIS and other Islamic jihadist groups like the Haqqani Network, the sanctuaries that they have. But also we need to make sure we have the right rules of engagement so that we can get in, we can defeat this army and work side by side with those Afghan coalition partners and other NATO partners.
I remember the Powell doctrine, Colin Powell saying we should go in with an overwhelming force, win quickly, create a peace, and then leave. American politicians of all stripes have been loath to do that, particularly since the Vietnam War brought the ugliness and the horror of combat into our living rooms, and it's always been sort of a piecemeal thing. 3,000 doesn't necessarily sound like a lot to win, per se. It sounds like enough to stop the tide. Are they really setting up, perhaps, to negotiate with the Taliban some sort of formal exit? Because everyone's saying that no matter what, the Taliban will be part of Afghanistan's government from here on out.
And I don't think we can allow the Taliban to be part of the government. You know, Karl von Clausewitz said that war is about imposing your will upon another. And we have not done that to the Taliban. They still maintain that very radical Islamist perspective, and we cannot allow that to happen now in the 21st century. So I think that what we need to do is defeat the Taliban, defeat that ideology there, and not allow them to ever have a sanctuary, because they're going to launch attacks out from that sanctuary that they established.
Well, coming into yesterday, America had lost 2,396 troops, soldiers, in Afghanistan, including 4 fatalities this year. So we better be sure, if we're going to do this, that we are going to do it.
Let the generals on the ground do this.
Colonel, I also want to ask you about this. Troops in Israel are now using virtual reality to train for combat in underground tunnels. You like this idea? I
absolutely do like this idea, because that's a very claustrophobic environment, and this is like the 2-foot war when you talk about going down these tunnel systems. And I think this is something also that we probably need to look at, because we know the Mexican drug cartels are using tunnels to come into the United States of America. So maybe that's something we also can train our Border Patrol law enforcement officers on. But Israel has a serious issue with these tunnels coming out of the Gaza Strip, and I think this is a good step in use of technology.
A lot of things going on around the world. It feels like we're walking on eggshells, whether it's the Korean Peninsula. They've got a new president.
Yes.
I think this new president, who's a liberal, could upset Donald Trump's, maybe some of his potential options there, particularly with the THAAD missile system and other things.
Yes.
So we're concerned about that. We're concerned about the Mediterranean and the Middle East. How are you feeling overall about things?
You know, I think one of the things that President Trump needs to do is have an address to the American people. You talk about the Powell doctrine. What is the Trump doctrine? How are we going to get away from nation building? How are we going to really get back to using our economic and energy sources of power that we can leverage, and diplomatic means that we can leverage? How are we going to build our military as a deterrent force so that we can combat these different threats that we see?
I guess it's the only memorable line from Godfather 3. Couldn't hold up to 1 and 2. Every time I get out, they pull me back in. I mean, can we get away from some of these things? It feels like we're always pulled back in as the world's policeman.
The thing is, when you portray weakness, then the void you create is going to be filled, and we created a void.
Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.